I have a secret, or rather, a confession. Just around 9 years ago, I did something that I'm quite embarrassed about. Something that I wish no one would know, but that here I feel compelled to reveal. In 2014, amidst a moment of impulsiveness, I bought a Sylvanian family doll. Meanwhile, my peers proudly presented their trendy goods: fidget spinners, mini iPhones, flashy Smiggle pencil cases. Do these ring a bell? Now, regardless of your mathematical ability, everyone in the 4th grade knew this very important mathematical equation, which is the higher the number of fidget spinners you had, the closer you were to being friends with the popular kids. Now, I only had one. During this time, I repressed my desire to want to share my interest in such dolls because I was caught up in the train wreck of wanting to fit in. Needless to say, I'm glad I've graduated from my Sylvanian dolls era because it was a costly interest, and I'm also glad that I've come to realize that such subconscious constraints that I'd put on myself, which restricted my ability to embrace what I liked, was mentally draining. Though this little confession of mine is only a minor depiction of emotional repression, I'd like to stress that such minor things can manifest into much bigger and much more negatively impactful things in the future. Now, it may be challenging to come to terms with the concept of emotional repression and the repercussions of it. However, rest assured, I believe that we can break down emotional repression and analogize it to a soda pop. Okay. Say I shake a soda pop repeatedly. We already know that the next person who opens the same exact soda pop is in for a messy surprise, and they're absolutely not going to have the best time. Well, the same goes with repressing your innate desires and authentic feelings over an extended period of time. When we perpetually avoid coming to terms with our emotions, our vulnerability, and our innate desires, it's like that pressure building up inside of a soda pop. Negative energy eventually bubbles up and leads to emotional drain and irrationality. So, when an emotionally repressed individual faces something triggering, their likelihood of reaching a breaking point regards to their emotional capacity is much higher than that of an individual who is emotionally available. This is because emotional repression oftentimes is the catalyst for emotional outbursts, often taking form of one of the 7 cardinal sins. Can you guess which one? Wrath. This is a byproduct of emotional repression, which is kind of similar to that irritating feeling you get once you shake a soda pop, open it up, only for the drink inside to overflow. Not only is wrath a byproduct, emotional repression can translate towards resentment towards others who hold the ability to express themselves publicly and do things that we don't allow ourselves to do. Now that we've acknowledged the existence of emotional repression, you may be wondering, well, how do I take action towards mitigating emotional repression? And how do I better my emotional management? And how do I find emotional liberation? Well, thanks for asking. In this lively assembly of modern thought, one philosophy stands indomitable: Stoicism. Stoicism is a school of philosophy that originated in Athens, founded by Zeno of Citium in 300 BCE, give or take. This philosophy all started when the Phoenician merchant Zeno set sail in the Mediterranean Sea, where he later faced a costly shipwreck, where he would end up losing all the material things that he held dearest to him. But not only the material things he would lose, but his physical capabilities and financial flexibilities. Yet, he was not close in proximity to being described as emotionally defeated or dejected. Rather, he triumphed over this happening, which would, in retrospect, be deemed as a negatively life-altering moment. Zeno had the power to allow this mishappening to drive him towards alcoholism, suicide, or a quiet, ordinary life in the service of others. Nevertheless, he didn't allow this shipwreck to be the defining point of the life that was left of him. Now, Zeno would even go on to poke fun at the mishappening, saying, "I made a prosperous journey when I suffered the shipwreck." Now, I'd like to ask you, how would you have reacted in this situation? Rationally, optimistically, or crestfallen and irrational? Because if I'm being 100% transparent with you all, I doubt that I would have been able to maintain the same level of composure Zeno displayed. Now, Stoics believed that our emotions were the result of our judgment about external events. It's not the external event themselves that cause our emotions, but our interpretations of them. Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius says, "You have power over your mind. Realize this, and you will find strength." This highlights the significance and the liberation in finding this distinction, as it allows us to free ourselves from the anxiety and the frustration that comes with our attempts to control the uncontrollable. Now, this falls under one of the fundamental pillars of philosophy called the dichotomy of control. It's the distinction between what we can and cannot control. Within our control is the way we think, our perception, our behavior, our action, and our motivation. And outside of our control is the way others perceive you, your body, and your property. You can make decisions about your reputation, but ultimately, you cannot decide how others perceive you. Now, this dichotomy builds on the idea that we can use our judgment to accept these emotions, but remind ourselves that we don't have to let them warp our worldview, govern our thoughts, or rule our actions. Because if we routinely let these negative emotions bubble up, it'll inevitably lead to emotional drain and irrationality. Now, one of my favorite quotes by Marcus Aurelius is, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." Here, Marcus Aurelius is asking us to prioritize things in life and to question whether it's worth it to dwell on the uncontrollable. I get it. There's an abundance of things we want to compete for. There's an abundance of prioritize we want to pursue. But the main thing that Stoics believe was vital to achieving emotional liberation is this state called apatheia. Now, apatheia is a Latin phrase that translates to the state of tranquility. It's the calm equanimity that follows with the absence of irrationality and heightened emotions. It's instrumental that in face of adversity, we maintain our composure and we create a mindset that is detached from our emotions. It's a state that isn't unattainable because in life, we face a plethora of opportunities to let our emotions run rampant and to let our impulsiveness get the best of us. For example, that toxic work environment you're in, being misunderstood, all of that. Now, alongside apatheia, we want to work towards ourea meritocratis. It's a term best used to describe this equilibrium between our mind and our head. And so, now that we've laid out the elements of Stoicism that we want to work towards, I would like to discuss with you guys some actions you can take. First, it's simple. You can stick a picture of yourself from when you were little on a bathroom mirror, or any mirror for that case. So every time you feel that emotional unrest, you remind yourself that you're harming yourself in the process, and you're harming that little child that you used to be. Because emotional repression coerces you to develop negative coping mechanisms and to develop a negative mindset. Because if you were friends with yourself, you wouldn't do something to constantly harm yourself. Next, Seneca states that we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. And Epictetus states we suffer not from the events in our lives, but our judgments about them. Can you see the similarity? They have highlighted how we experience suffering from our inability to see things in a rational manner. We suffer from such subconscious desires of wanting to anticipate or premeditate negative events, or see things as not the way they are. For example, our desire to want to predict consequences of our actions, our desire to devise scenarios to cope with not knowing what the future holds, our desire to overplay mistakes in our head and admonish ourselves from the mistakes we made from the past. By feeding into such faulty desires, we put ourselves in a mental disposition out of touch with reality and out of touch with what things truly are. To face our faulty desires, we must lay them bare, and like Marcus Aurelius says, strip the legend that encrusts them. Because when we permit our emotions to run free, we allow our negative emotions to transfer into an unbeatable enemy. That anger and that frustration and that anxiety becomes chronic and debilitating. So we have to gain power by naming them. So the power of journaling in mitigating emotional outbreaks is best highlighted by the UCLA professor of psychology called Matthew Lieberman, who states that the part of our brain called the amygdala, which is responsible for detecting fear, had a decrease in activity when subjects named their emotion. So to conclude, we can mitigate emotional outbreaks by voicing our emotions. Because by bottling our emotions, we lose our dignity and our self-respect. It prevents us from giving from a place of an abundance. Instead, we give from a place that is running on empty, which results in frustration and an emotional outbreak in the future. Therefore, only you have control over how you pop. You can continue to suppress your emotions and eventually pop and inflict your anger on those around you, which stems from your inability to voice your emotions. Or B, you can take an imaginary needle to pop that irrational bubble that surrounds your mind and look at things in a holistic manner and to realize that there are things within your control and outside of your control, and to focus on the things you can control. Thank you.